After 3 years of work, our follow-up to the Meat Eater Fish and Game Cookbook is here. It's the Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, campfire, and camp stove. Here is your book for everything that's best cooked or eaten outside. From grilling to open fire cooking to Dutch ovens to smokers to barbecue to backpacking meals to how to pull off the perfect fish fry, with pit stops along the way for lessons about Ice Age cooking methods and the best 5 ways to construct a cooking fire you can be proud of. And of course, we're focusing on wild game and fish here with over 100 recipes, including stuffed venison burgers 3 ways, wild duck with ahi verde sauce, a jerky made with cola, a gin and tonic made with fire-charred lemons, and grilled frog legs made with a sticky sweet sauce. This ain't your normal cookbook, so be prepared to be surprised. Get your copy now. For more info, visit themeateater.com or buy it wherever books are sold.
You're listening to the Sportsman's Nation Podcast Network, brought to you by Savage Arms. Now, Savage has come out with a new model, and that model is the 110 Ultralight. At under 6 pounds, the 110 Ultralight is designed to combat elevation and the elements while maintaining the performance of a factory blueprinted Savage 110 action. This comes in a variety of calibers. It has a gray AccuFinish stock with adjustable comb height. This is an awesome rifle, and basically Savage is at it again. These guys have done amazing things in the past, and now they're doing amazing things in the future. If you want to find out more information about the 110 Ultralight, visit savagearms.com.
My name is Clay Newcomb, and I'm the host of the Bear Hunting Magazine podcast. I'll also be your host into the world of hunting the icon of North American wilderness, the bear. We'll talk about tactics, gear, conservation, but we'll also bring you into some of the wildest country on the planet chasing bear. This week we had Matt Dye and Adam Keith of Land and Legacy Consultation come to the Bear Hunting Magazine Global Headquarters. These guys have been friends of mine for a while. They have a really good and very informative land management podcast, but they do a lot of land consultation. They, in the last 3 years, have done consultations in 27 states. So we have a conversation about land management, about whitetail hunting, and a whole lot of stuff. Interesting conversation. The first of this podcast is us touring some land right here in the Ozarks of Arkansas, and we're kind of just getting their commentary on tree species and ways that I could improve this property. So you're going to enjoy that. Muzzleloader seasons in the United States and in Canada are typically fairly liberal in terms of season dates and length of seasons, and that's why I love to hunt with a muzzleloader, taking some good deer with a muzzleloader. And I'm going to be hunting more this fall with a muzzleloader than I probably ever have. And CVA, the company CVA, makes an incredible line of muzzleloaders. The company was established in 1971. They're known for their Bagara barrels, which is a world-famous, high-quality barrel. They have multiple lines of muzzleloaders. They're known for some very high-end, very accurate muzzleloaders, but they're also known for their price point in some places. CVA is a great place for you to step into the muzzleloader world or to upgrade your old muzzleloader to something way better. So check out cva.com. Be ready for this fall. I know that I will. You know, one of the biggest bears ever killed was with a muzzleloader, Colby. The Western Bear Foundation, nonprofit hunting conservation organization based out of Cody, Wyoming. They're fighting the good fight out west, standing up for the rights of bears. Yep, that's right. These conservationists, hunters like us, members of the Western Bear Foundation, we actually love bears. We like them. We want them on the landscape. We also like their fat, their hide, their meat, their claws. And I think we can both have what we want. And that's what the Western Bear Foundation is doing. They're standing up for the rights of sportsmen and for hunting, but also for solid bear conservation. Check them out. So we're just going to walk through this property. Small property here in the Ozarks. And I just want to hear your commentary on the different species, maybe what you think happened here.
Sure.
And maybe what you would, if you just had like a 10-minute consultation with a client, like you would say,
yeah,
hey, this is what you should do if we were managing this for whitetail deer. And we've been doing a little logging on the property. You guys will be glad to know. I know you guys hate like full canopy cover.
Right.
So yeah, I'm working on a barn over here. So we cut down some oaks that we milled up, and I'm amazed that you can take out one oak tree.
How much lumber that gets you?
Well, how much lumber, but also how much canopy space.
Oh, sure.
I mean, like I've got like what feels like room for like a 1/4 acre food plot after like, one time cutting down a tree. So let's just walk up here. Hey.
Yeah.
All right. Do you guys have these white buckeyes or Ohio buckeyes? Do y'all see a lot of those?
Yeah.
Usually
riparian
areas.
Yeah. I think you got some there.
Man, I bet this property has 1,000
really
Ohio buckeyes on it.
Wow.
I mean, I'm serious. They are.
It's kind of a weird site for us to see them, and typically it is bottomland. But it's. Are there wet? Is this a wet hillside?
No.
Usually, typically dry.
No.
Huh.
Yeah, they're. I've thinned some of them out. I've got some that I really like, but so there's a lot of limestone in this area. Surprisingly, really good soil. Like we have these big limestone like shelves. Like there's parts of this property where you can see
outcroppings.
Big outcroppings. But if you're not if your shovel's not hitting, a 5,000 pound rock, you're in pretty black dirt.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. All right. Tell me what you're seeing.
It's an interesting forest composition here with, you've got some taller eastern red cedars, 30 plus foot tall, but then you have hedge or Osage orange,
hackberry,
hackberry.
And then you have some oak regeneration where there's a little bit of sunlight. There is a major issue that we see that we'll address more and more as we move up through here.
Can I guess what it is?
Bush honeysuckle.
Ooh, no, that's a curse word.
That is the kiss of
death.
This
place is full of it.
Full.
And how far are you from Fayetteville?
15 miles.
Yeah.
So
just off the interstate.
Fayetteville,
lots of traffic moving back
Kansas City, St. Louis, these big metropolis areas.
Anywhere in Illinois, Ohio, got it.
You can just see it like spreading like a virus.
So did people bring it in like the coronavirus? Did anybody? We are standing pretty close to each other here. Did they bring that in for what purpose?
Ornamental. So
really?
A lot of our
not
invasive
even that
species.
Pretty.
No. But it's got tons of berries,
leaves.
and birds eat the berries, and then they carry those berries away, poop them out, woof, and you can just see it. It goes from residential areas out to the rural areas. So,
and what you see, like with these tree species, a lot of them are some of the first ones from a tree species standpoint to come back after something was open. Walnut, honey locust, hedge, eastern red cedar, and persimmon in this portion of the country.
Right?
Yeah, that's what you typically see come back from that first generation forest.
So this would have been cut.
This would have been definitely. This was open. Probably, I would like to honestly go back and Google Earth and see what the site would register as. But this was way back when very open.
Yeah.
Now closed cane forest.
Because this is all secondary growth trees that you're
seeing. Go back pre-settlement, most likely glades, savannas, open landscape.
Really,
was managed
pre-settlement
because we're right at that transition.
Oak Hickory climax.
Yeah, you would have had that,
right?
But your south slopes would still have raging fires going up them.
Yeah. Okay,
and so they would be more open.
South-facing slope right here.
Mm-hmm. And so then once fire was removed, then it started you saw the tree species probably transition over from the north and east slopes or areas where fire wasn't as severe So you would have the oak hickory transition more on the south and the west facing slopes. But then when it started getting logged out, here we are now, where at some point it was probably logged out, and then you have these tree species that are here now be the ones that colonize.
Do you think it would be safe to say that this was probably logged like in the 1940s or something? Because there are some big oaks. We're looking at to our left here, there's a big hole in the canopy where I cut down one of my better oaks on this property for that barn.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, we counted the rings back on that oak, like from just right on the ground, and it was 80 plus.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of oak was it?
It was I think a northern red oak. It was definitely a red oak, but it could have been a spotted oak. Some people call them spotted oaks. Probably a northern red oak. Let's keep walking up here.
But I wouldn't say that a lot of these other it's amazing how fast some of those cedars grow and how big and quick they get.
Adam, what is that? This is a test. Yeah, you nailed it. Man, a lot of chinkapin oak here. Down 2 hours south of here, you can't find a chinkapin oak. I mean,
it's not as rocky down there, probably, is it?
Maybe. Like on the other side of the Arkansas River, down the Ouachita's.
Yeah.
Like, you can't find a chinkapin oak. This place wants to have chinkapin oaks more than standard white oaks.
Because of all the,
we see a ton of chinkapin oaks on bluffs, creeks.
Okay.
So rocky.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's another sign that, hey, this is, or once was, very open, glady-like.
So right over here is where I cut down a bodark.
Yeah.
There was a bodark right there that was probably 22, 23 inches at the base and was straight as an arrow, which is unusual. And it was, I guess it was because the canopy was already around it, and so it just
had to grow up,
shot to the top.
Same thing when you see with a lot of the cedars, even some of the persimmons in here, they're typically straight, but I mean,
these are some big persimmons on this property.
There's cherry over there that's very straight. You can those will get to lean too.
Yep.
That cedar right there, man, I'm surprised you didn't cut it down.
Man, I would have cut that. I was going to, but this is like my trail, so we got to keep that one. But see, here's a big red oak, nice red oak right there.
Yeah, this is like when you look here, it's diverse, which is great. You have some chinkapins, but then you look up here and you've got persimmons, which are tall and straight, and
that tells you that it was open.
It was open,
recently.
man.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a black locust right there. There's a honey locust just down below us. Again, those are some of the first ones that will come back. Every farmer deals with black locust, honey locust coming in pastures. Well, because that's the first thing that comes back in an opening to make it and transition back.
Here's a good case study right here. So when we bought this place, the first thing I did was I cleared a 1/4 acre food plot.
Of course, that's what you're supposed to do as deer hunter, right?
That's exactly what you're supposed to do. So this was woods where we're going right now. This was all woods. And I'm going to tell you I'm going to tell you a story of triumph of the whitetail hunter, but then I'm also going to tell you a story of tragedy. I built this food plot, dug out the stumps. You could probably shoot 40 yards across this.
Yep.
And let's wade through all this. You're probably good.
Clay went first anyhow. He got them all.
Probably is easy to say, but we still have a 2-hour drive.
Good thing we didn't use Colby's tick repellent chapstick.
Yeah.
Had to try it. Okay. So this was in 2005. I cleared a lane. So from my house, I could see this plot. It's since grown up.
Wow.
I saw a giant deer from my house in 2007. And this deer I ended up killing. That big deer that's in there. This field was a beautiful clover field. I mean, this is pretty clover food plot as you've ever seen. And the deer were hitting it. Well, so that's the victory. Okay. Yep. And what I was shocked with at the time was that this was not the kind of place I wanted to deer hunt. I mean, to me, deer hunting was like going to some wild place. And here in my backyard, I had the pretty suburban backyard, had these deer. But the reason I had these deer is because the 40 acres north of me was uninhabited.
Mm-hmm.
I killed 2 real nice deer out of this food plot. And then a guy bought that place who was a big deer hunter and totally changed the deer hunting.
Really?
What
was he doing?
Well, he just lived there.
Okay.
He just bought the land and was a deer hunter, and more power to him. He just started bringing in family, and they killed deer, and he actually killed a giant deer on that place.
Wow.
So do you see the status of my food plot, how dilapidated it is?
It's a native.
Clay
Here's the thing,
Newcomb
though.
lost interest in hunting here after all the potential for big deer was pretty much gone. So anyway, this has been grown up for 7 years. So if on this small property, this opening, what would be most beneficial for me to attract wildlife here to do with this piece of property? At one time, I would say this was close to a quarter acre.
So I guess a big question would be, this is the same questions we always ask our clients.
I want to kill a deer.
All right, so we want to kill a deer. Just any deer or a mature 4.5 or older buck?
I'd like a 3 1/4 year old deer.
So then we got to look at the neighborhood and say, what's the limited resource here? Is there food plots? Most, just like you told the story.
Around.
Are there food plots in the area?
People are feeding deer.
Okay, so
We're in Arkansas.
We can
We're
bait
in
deer
Arkansas.
in Arkansas.
That's right. Arkansas, not that different from Texas, right? Just more trees, but we still have
I could high
feeders.
fence this place.
You could.
And so, feeding is a big thing. So you're not going to be able, unless you want to spend a fortune, to outbait your neighbor, most likely.
Right.
So, okay, what is something else? And this is where a lot of people aren't doing this, but what happens to a deer that gets pressure during the fall? He starts trying to hold up, get thicker cover. He's just trying to survive. And that comes in the form of thickets, the best cover that's also secure. So he's not, even if you have the thickest area in the neighborhood, if you walk through it every day, they're not going to utilize it like they would.
Right.
So if you could turn in these thick pockets or use just young forest restoration, cut some timber, let some thickets, some stump sprouts grow up. That's where hinge cutting has come in really popular. But if you do a mix, you can provide a secure area for the deer, especially a mature deer who's keying in on the pressure a lot more than a doe with a button buck behind her that's coming into your yard every day.
Yeah.
So I would much prefer, if this is an area, we're in a state that you can bait, I would much prefer to have quality cover than a quality food plot.
Okay.
Well, there's food out there, as we're saying, through bait that's super easy to get to. It's always out
What
there.
if I want to be cool and have a food plot I can put on Instagram?
Would you people doing that?
I think
Clearly, I
especially-
don't. Okay,
Yeah,
look
especially
at
on
my
a
food
small
plot.
property, you really need to take in the neighborhood and what those other resources are or aren't. Identify that limited resource. Here, and what we find in most places, it is not only just good cover, but the secure cover, and then hunt that. Because the thing is, it doesn't
let
take.
this grow up.
Well, reset it. Get the cool season out
Well, I mean,
and start cutting some more.
Okay, but you're not saying come back in here and plant more clover.
You could if you want to, and then pick a spot just 100 yards that way or whichever way the property lays, and get over there and then cut in a young forest pocket. It may be a half acre where you just go in, kind of do what you did here, but leave the tops where they lay.
So
Just cut them.
Yeah.
And that creates, now you have pretty good food. You could have your feeder if you want. So you've got a destination feeding area, but then you have a couple of areas, if you do
Close
two
to
of
it.
them,
I'm
close
with
to
you.
it.
And hunt it
Yeah.
Here's a cool
sparingly.
native grass.
Sparingly.
You probably know
Oh, yeah.
this one.
Oh, we spied something. What is that?
What does it look like?
Wheat?
Kind of looks like wheat, so it's a cool season grass. It's native, but in a practical sense, a bottle brush, right?
Okay.
Bottle
I see what
brush
you're saying.
grass.
Is that what it is?
That's what it is.
That's
it's a common
that's
name.
a pretty
yeah.
common grass.
And
That's
it's a cool season. You'll find it
Bottle
right there
brush
in areas. And then, of course,
Yeah, there's
we've got
this
a
little
Virginia
green
wild
right
rye.
here.
So
I think elm, cut elms.
Yeah, they're not doing any good, are they?
Well, when they're above the reach of a deer, but elm is one of the species, American elm. When you cut it and it regenerates, highly palatable food source, and deer will go to that woody browse over other species. Such another one is flowering dogwood, maples. There's a couple maples and stuff through here. Cut those things. That's additional food source. Greenbriers growing everywhere. Encourage that type of native forage to grow.
So we've worked now, we created Land and Legacy in 2017, and we've worked in 27 states across the country, mainly about whitetail deer. And there's only a few tree species that we would say we find deer highly selecting to eat the leaves. And one of those, probably the most popular, bodark.
Really?
Yeah.
Crazy. It doesn't look like a leaf that a deer would eat. It looks waxy, leathery,
It's thick though.
thick, but they
A lot of moisture.
just devour it.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll be darned.
And so you may not notice it because you have an abundance of it around here.
Right, we got a lot of it.
And this is a pretty thick, you have a lot of undergrowth.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's
Bush honeysuckle
turning
heavy.
into bush honeysuckle, but yeah.
You know, another tree that I've seen in this part of the world, deer selecting for their leaves is mulberry.
And that's the other one that I
Yeah.
was going to say.
I one time was watching a doe feeding on acorns. It was in the fall. The leaves were turning, and I was sitting right under this big mulberry. And one of those, the leaves are like 5-6 inches across sometimes. And this big leaf, like, we kind of swooned down to the ground and landed. And that doe walked like 30 yards to pick that leaf up.
Crazy.
But that's the
She
thing.
saw it. It was wild.
Observation, though, in a tree stand and just being out with nature, you see those things, and that is obviously a preference, right?
Right.
Key into those preferences and offer those types, or make that food available here on the property where it's not being elsewhere in that 40 acres that the guy bought. He's not going to go in there and do that kind of stuff. Diversify your property, make it different by knowing what they like, what they're attracted to, and make it where it's accessible to them.
Yeah.
Anybody who's hunted national forests has probably ran into clear cuts before and gone, well, it seems like those deer really like that clear cut. Well, those could be 50, 100, 200 acre clear cuts. We're talking half acre to an acre, to where it really congregates deer travel patterns.
I see what you're saying.
And so it's like, well, they're still beneficial. Now the same number of deer wouldn't use that use a 200 acre clear cut. Right. But the deer in this area will certainly key in on that and start using it. That summer tanager is still singing.
All right, we're at the Bear Hunting Magazine Global Headquarters. We just went on a little tour,
Nature walk.
a nature walk.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got Matt Dye, Adam Keith, Colby Moorhead. We're at the Global Headquarters. Man, thank you guys for driving down here. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, we're
you
happy to
guys
be
are
here.
fellow Ozarkers.
Yeah.
That's right.
So we're like, so you're like pretty much in your home turf here. So you're about 2 hours away from where we are here.
I'm born and raised Ozarkian.
Yes.
Matt
I'm
is
semi-adopted, I guess.
Yeah.
It's just now home.
We've been talking about, a couple times on the podcast, we've been talking about tribalism and how that's bad. So I'm trying to reframe my mind to not say like us and them, like Ozarkers, like versus the world, That's kind of my worldview.
Is that what it's coming down to?
Am I us or them?
You're on the border, Colby. So Colby moved here from Dallas.
Transitional
so, he's
phase,
doing really
huh?
good. He's kind of picking up,
Yeah.
And so are we, you said us and them, and Matt and I, are we those?
Well, yeah.
Undetermined.
Those guys from
Labeled.
across the state line.
Yeah. No, you know what is funny though is that between here and there, between like, our Northwest Arkansas and Missouri, people are really confused where the South starts.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Because to me, Southern Missouri exhibits the characteristics of an upland Southern culture.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So upland Southern, like when you hear the word Southern, and here we go again, tribalism. Nope. We're just talking about what we see. We're just the messengers here.
Observation.
Yeah.
No, like Southern culture, you would typically associate with agriculture, swampland, and so that's not what this is at all.
No.
But I heard a phrase actually pretty recently about upland Southern culture, which would be the Ozarks and the Highland Appalachian regions.
I was going to say, because I came from the East, and so
Yeah,
had a lot of
that would
experience
be-
with Appalachia, and it's like this compare and contrast. I have both experiences. Like I put almost them together. It's like
Well,
the same
exactly.
That's where
Scottish
my
people.
heritage,
Right.
I'm Scotch Irish. And so when we were, I guess my ancestors were brought over, it was, and then they started taking homesteading or taking up home places. It was the Appalachians, West Virginia and Virginia.
Yeah.
And then whenever that started to, I guess when they started to move, and I guess with a little bit of history, when they ran out of money, then they moved on to the Ozarks because it was so much like West Virginia, Virginia. I would think that, in my mindset, if it didn't work back there, I wouldn't move to some place that looks very similar and try it again.
Try it again. Yeah.
But they did. So here I am.
That's why the Ozarks are one of the poorest places in the country.
Yep.
Because they tried it again here, and it didn't work again.
Yep. I would
No,
like
you know
just
what?
stop in Kentucky or Tennessee.
Hey,
That's good.
I read just the other day that at one time in the Ozarks of Arkansas, 70% of the settlers were from middle Tennessee.
Really?
So we had a ton of overlap with culture between Middle Tennessee and Eastern Tennessee as well. But that was like the travel route, and you can see how patterns started to develop in communities because there would be these communities that formed, and then they're like, hey, Jim and Sue moved to Arkansas.
Oh, yeah.
And I hear there's this and that there. And this, constantly, these people were moving based upon a promise of a better
sure.
future.
Yeah.
It's a
Really?
cattleman's paradise.
Yeah, the Ozarks.
Quote Lonesome Dove for you. Yeah.
No, so, yeah, it's good to have you guys here. Man, so you guys have a business called Land and Legacy. And Land and Legacy is a lot of different things. Tell me what Land and Legacy is.
How much time do we have?
Yeah.
So essentially,
Give me the short version, and then we'll get into the long version.
Well,
just
then
as
I'll
we talk
answer the
about-
short version, and Matt will
Is
answer.
this how this works?
I like the
ahead, go
teamwork.
ahead.
So we're a natural resource management land consulting firm.
Okay.
So we
Nice.
work with landowners across the country to restore landscapes, to offer quality, healthy landscapes for the wildlife that live there. Sometimes we get into cattle, multi-use properties where we're trying to integrate crop rotations, cattle rotations with more productive wildlife populations.
Yeah. Now, are you guys? I know you're very well versed in biology. What's your educational background in?
So I have a degree in biology with a concentration in wildlife management.
Okay.
And I'm an agriculture animal science, so I come from the ag world.
Okay.
But have, I was fortunate enough to have a family farm that was cattle operation, but was really passionate about hunting. So my brother and I, we just kind of self-taught, school of hard knocks of cutting trees. That really attracted wildlife. Burning, that really helps the wildlife, things like that.
Sounds like you have a really complicated process here. Cut trees, attract wildlife. Burn, attract wildlife. It's
I
like
like
really
it.
like caveman stuff.
You can
Pretty much, yeah. It's like, what was nature? Caveman style. Like I call it caveman thought process.
I was
where-
making a joke, and now you're like, I'm dead serious.
Well,
Clay.
it's
Dead
funny
serious.
because
Because first caveman, when he saw fire for the first time, he said, "Ooh, fire good.
Yeah.
I
Make
gotta
more
have
fire."
some of that.
Yeah,
yeah.
If you build the bedding, deer will come.
kind of. Yeah,
I mean,
kind of.
essentially, you can boil land management down to disturbances. Fire and cutting trees is a type of disturbance. Cattle grazing is a type of disturbance. So as many articles and stuff as you can read about land management and this and that, you can quickly complicate things. But essentially, man, you've got a lot of disturbances on properties. You're probably going to have quite a bit of wildlife.
Yeah, but isn't that the history of North American continent? Like, we often have this image that pre-European settlement, the continent was just like full of wildlife.
yes.
And what I've been reading in a book by Brooks Blevins, we had Brooks Blevins on the podcast a while back, is that there was a period of time, potentially thousands of years, when much of the Ozarks were uninhabited year-round by Native Americans. Yeah, so there was year-round colonization by Native Americans. Well, let me back up. 12,000 years ago is the first human evidence in the Ozarks for, that's when the people first got here.
Yeah.
They stayed here year-round for like a couple thousand years. They were here. And then for whatever reason, permanent settlement retreated. And then there were several thousand years And that was part of the reason the Ozarks were so such a good place to settle in the 1700s. And like when French trappers and stuff, the French were the ones that settled all these places and named all these places. It's really a shame. Yeah. Tribalism, play, boom. No, I love the French. And when they got here, there were no year-round native tribes here, and the Osage were the main ones that were using this, and they would seasonally hunt this.
Right.
And so anyway, I can't remember exactly why I started telling that story.
Something about disturbances, maybe?
Disturbances.
Yeah. For
so
us,
we had this idea that there was all this wildlife here, but when the Native Americans weren't here, those several thousand years where there weren't as much human disturbances, primarily by fire, wildlife populations were lower.
Yeah, and I think populations too, when you read the journals of some of the early exploration, they'll talk a lot about wildlife and the vast quantities that were there. But you also have to understand too, when you look back and kind of study that, is that populations fluctuated pretty significantly. Like if you had really severe winters a couple of years in a row, populations were lower, or major drought, or you had a influx of prey population, and then at some point following that is an influx of predator population. So the prey species lowered, and once it lowered to a certain amount, prey species or predator species moved on or starved. And so, depending on when you were here, and we talk so much about native landscapes, that's a big part of our business, but that's where, the question is, well, what do we call a native? What time frame?
Right.
And we go for what's achievable. Well, that 1700, just pre-European settlement. Yeah. Because we can't go back and bring animals that have gone extinct. Like, we can go back.
That's not in Land and Legacy's wheelhouse to bring this back to like the Pleistocene.
Yeah, that's right. So we really try to manage for that native 1700, pre-settlement.
Well, and we know that it was through the settlers that it was an abundant landscape with lots of wildlife, with lots of diversity, fantastic mixtures of different plant communities, from hard mass producing trees all the way down to, grasses, both cool and warm season stuff. Like, there's everything here growing in the landscape. So if that was some of the best times, well, let's restore it. Let's get it back.
Yeah.
Or you read those journals, everybody's probably at some point stumbled upon or read a portion of the Lewis and Clark journals, but they talk a lot about the species that they find or use for medicinal purposes. And it's like, oh yeah, we got that. We don't have a lot of it anymore, but it's still here.
Yeah.
And so that's always been really, really cool for me to look back in history and study those.
Yeah. Cabeza de Vaca. Have you ever read that book?
I have not.
Cabeza de Vaca. It's right up.
He's throwing out different languages.
He said that. I was like,
really, you should read the book. Cabeza.
We'll have to write that down.
It's the first journal of the first European that traveled across the southern United States in 15 something.
Yeah,
is that
that'd be awesome?
What is that?
Cabeza de Vaca.
Okay.
That was his name. He was a Spanish guy, and incredible book. I'm gonna backtrack on myself because I think I got it mixed up. When the Native Americans were gone, there was wildlife populations increased. Yeah. When they were here year round, they decreased. But the fire suppression and the stuff that they did was obviously really beneficial to them. And so the whole point of a lot of the people that talk about that Cabeza de Vaca book, basically he went all the way, he started in Florida and went all the way to South Texas. Basically all
poor soul, he was burning up.
Oh,
probably.
Man, it was incredible.
Swamps,
especially with the amount of swamps that we had back then.
And basically they saw very little big megafauna.
Yeah.
Like they talked about deer, they talked about seeing native tribes that had some puma mountain lion decor. So, they were mountain lions, but they never killed one. Wow. They never talked about bear.
Really?
It was pretty incredible. But the whole point of it is that there are these fluctuations, and we would,
Sure.
you would think it would just be this like zoo.
Yeah.
In 15, I can't remember exactly when the book was written, but incredible book. Wow, it was incredible.
And thinking of, one thing you said there kind of stirs a comment for me is when the Native Americans were here, there wasn't as many animals because they were obviously killing them and eating them and putting pressure, so driving populations away. Yeah. But then you think a lot about, well, what was probably occurring if there was no hunting? Well, populations grew. They probably started eating a lot more. We see this all the time in our work in present day of deer populations exploding, people not managing them. Therefore, young forest and woody browse and plant communities are overeaten to where then you have winter kills. If you get a really bad winter, there's no food, so then nature thins the herd in a very brutal way.
Yeah,
compared to the way we should be doing it.
And that's not documented because people weren't there. So you're left to kind of assume well, that's the way populations work. It's crazy. And there wasn't that suburban area impacting all of this at the same time. Isolation of populations where they can't move and migrate. Buffalo. Gosh, imagine the range on those things back then.
Yeah.
Huge.
Well, there were buffalo all the way down into Arkansas, all through the Ozarks and Missouri. Yeah. And that's relevant to you guys because what I hear you guys talking about a lot is restoration of native landscapes. So I think probably to people that are paying quite a bit of attention, they recognize that invasive species are a big problem inside of our landscapes.
I feel like sometimes when we talk invasive species that we could take the people in this country that are really aware of it and fill up this room. It seems like there's not a lot of people that are aware of what's going on around us.
A lot of people see
Well, talk to me about that because I hear you guys talk about that a ton.
Yeah.
And with my background too, I mean, I recognize invasive species, and sometimes we have this love-hate relationship.
Yeah.
Japanese honeysuckle. I grew up killing deer on Japanese honeysuckle in January and February down on public land in southwest Arkansas. I never was that great at it, but my dad was better. So honeysuckle to us is sweet, a honeysuckle patch.
Oh yeah.
And then but we also know the overall long-term benefits of that are low compared to what you could have.
Absolutely.
So talk to me about invasive species.
Yeah, that's something that you say that. It's in our position, in our what we promote is, it can. Obviously, we've got to work with a lot of landowners, but if we go down south and we're like invasive species, we got to get rid of Japanese honeysuckle. And a deer hunter down there who's been making his life finding patches of, he's like, get out of here! You guys don't know how to grow deer. That they're eating the honeysuckle. Well, then we go up north. And it's like, we got to get rid of the autumn olive. And they're like, that's where all the deer are. You guys are foolish. But when it comes to longevity and the actual health of animal populations that's actually sustainable and can continue, we have to monitor our invasive species. And so
why are there so many invasive species that people are so connected to? For instance, eastern red cedar around here. I know you guys, that's a curse word.
Well, I should say
break
this.
That down, yeah.
Yeah, invasive species.
I'm sorry, that's not an invasive. That's a native species.
Native species with an aggressive tendency.
Yes, so if you disturb the landscape, it's going to pop up.
Or don't burn, or improper grazing management, things like that. Yeah.
Because there's the non-native side, and then there are just invasive species that have that tendency to just grow without that disturbance. So
because they don't have a natural predator.
Correct.
And so you take
a beaver eating, a cedar tree eating beaver.
I
never thought
an
of
insect or a fungus.
Funguses, insects, things like that are controlling that species.
Gotcha.
Those don't usually make the whatever transition from whether the species came from Asia, Europe, whatever. Those natural predators are left, but this plant is here, and now it can grow seemingly uncontrolled, very aggressive because that predator is not here present in this landscape.
So take common milkweed, which any deer hunters probably at some point used common milkweed to be a wind indicator. It's a native species here. But if you notice, some years you can monitor common milkweed and be like, there's a couple bugs that are all over that, and it started to make seed pods, and those seed pods kind of just shriveled up, and it didn't make seed. It didn't appear like those little black and orange, sometimes solid black, but little aphids, little insect that are all over them. And some years you're like, man, the aphids took all the milkweed. Something happened. But then other years you're like, man, I got a ton of milkweed. But then it's like, as you see that population increase, and you see the insects come in, and it just looks a little sick. But you take common milkweed and then go to Asia, where it is an invasive species in their part of the world, and the leaves are all perfect. It makes seed because there is no natural predator. Nothing to really kind of keep it at bay. And that's just one example. There's been so many times on my farm where I've been fighting invasive species, and through whether it's cutting or herbicide use, whatever it is, it's just been like, oh my goodness, is this a never-ending battle? Because it sure feels like that. And you kind of have that thought process. Is there somebody where I'm sitting here fighting a species from Asia? Is there somebody in Asia fighting a species? And they are. Like common ragweed, common milkweed. Those are the common invasive species. And so at least we do have that to cheer about.
It's a fair trade. But like going back to that comment of like down south, people are promoting and hunting over and like Japanese honeysuckle. Up north, a lot of people are loving the autumn olive. But it's like, what happens? Like that's such a small time frame to put yourself in of you going to the woods, observing maybe a deer walking out of an autumn olive thicket. But that same acre, what happens if you remove that autumn olive and you replace it with a native shrub? Now that offers both cover, the same quality cover, and then forage on top of that. Now you just improve that acre for the species you're wanting.
For the time frame.
So
I understand what you're saying. So like Japanese honeysuckle would be deer aren't browsing Japanese honeysuckle that much when there's better stuff available. They're browsing it at the peak stress periods.
It's the only thing that's green there in that time
and
frame,
so
right?
We would come in without knowledge and go, well, Japanese honeysuckle is the only reason these deer survive.
Caveman mindset. Remember I said, oh, caveman fire, good. Need more fire. It's like, oh, Japanese honeysuckle, good. Need more Japanese honeysuckle.
My deer. But if you took that, what I'm hearing you say, Matt, is if you took that 5 acres and improved it with a native vegetation, that would become valuable year round for the deer.
Absolutely.
Now, they may not all 30 deer on your, property may not be in that one half acre,
and
that's what that's then the perception.
Correct.
Is that this is valuable. Well, you might spread them out a little bit.
We have to look at, and we fight this quite a bit, but we have to look at population and landscape level, not just. And we did it here on your property, not just your 7 acres or not just your 40 acres. We got to look at like the whole neighborhood and say, what does this population, this deer population need? Not that individual target buck. Like what does he need? Does he need this food plot? No. We got to look at the whole landscape and say, we got to improve it. So if it means taking away Japanese honeysuckle from this big patch and improving it, well, that's what we need to do.
How many native species, invasive species would be, like if you just like on my property, would you say 20% of the species are invasive?
On your property,
or on any property. I'm just trying to get an idea
because it varies so greatly.
It depends on the region. For here, my mind probably only wraps around bush honeysuckle.
There's multiflora rose.
Yeah, I guess that's
fescue.
True. Fescue, which I don't know if I would technically call it an invasive. Some people, if you say invasive around a bunch of cattle guys and say fescue, you probably get
you're not walking
your
away
face
from that
restructured. But
Now, but I mean, it's an invasive
I guess to
species.
answer your question, it's a non-native species.
Growing tendencies, yes. And for these purposes of what the 7 acres
But I mean,
is,
it didn't
yes.
come from here.
No,
Correct.
No.
European.
So no need to soften the blow for the cattlemen, man. This is a bear hunting magazine podcast.
So fescue is terrible if we're looking at it from a wildlife standpoint.
Yeah.
And it's really not great if we look at it from a cattle standpoint
Fescue
right now.
toxicosis, man.
It's terrible because we drove through miles and miles of brown, yellowish colored fields. It's a cool season grass trying to survive the summer heat.
Yeah.
It doesn't stand a chance.
It's been hot and dry. Doesn't look good.
And so, as on average, I'll play your game with the question, I guess. When it comes to overall working all these properties across the country and trying to monitor the amount of, let's just say, non-native versus invasive, it would probably be mind-blowing for a lot of people to realize how much of their property is colonized by non-native species.
Yeah.
Whether it be smooth brome, Reed's canary, tall fescue. I mean, that's just listing some of
Those are the grasses.
the grasses, or Bermuda grass down south, or Bahia grass. And then you go into the shrubs: autumn olive, bush honeysuckle, Chinese privet. Then you can go into trees. Oh yeah, vines.
You got English ivy, Oriental bittersweet. I mean, the list goes on and on and on from
Wisteria,
the different.
Vinca minor. Do y'all see that?
That sounds familiar. What's the common name?
I don't know.
Yeah,
It may not mean minor, maybe Vinca major. I've got some, and I think it was a landscape cover crop that I see in the woods.
you're a landscaping guy,
Yeah.
So
You're to blame.
yeah.
There it was. They plant it all
You
the
know how
time.
awful it is in the landscaping
Japanese
world.
barberry is another shrub.
Oh, that's a bad
I
one.
saw one of those that y'all posted that was out in the woods.
Oh yeah,
A
the
barberry.
crimson red barberry or something like dwarf barberry is a big one. Like we drove by, I'm trying to remember where I saw it. It was a new church right up to where we're at that they had just built the church during all this COVID-19 stuff, and then all of a sudden you see out in front and there's like 20 barberry trees or shrubs planted, and I'm like, what? Why do we have to repeat history?
That's
here?
a popular landscape plant.
For
I've
sure.
never seen one
it is.
outside of a landscape bed, though. That's
and,
what I
and
saw.
here's the thing. This is where, because if you look, it was first introduced and used in landscaping in the East Coast. So you have to have a seed source. And so out there, that's where you have it a lot. Here, it's just started to be used in landscaping on a pretty regular basis. So, I mean, hate to look in our magic 8-ball and say what's the future look like, but I would imagine, based on the planting rate that we're starting to see it on the landscape in residential and commercial properties, we'll probably start seeing it in our understory.
For instance, as an example, one of the worst infestations I've seen of Japanese barberry specifically was right on the New York-Pennsylvania border. We're talking middle of nowhere. I mean, small town, not a big intersection, traffic area, and we're middle of 400 or 500 acres. It's everywhere through the timber. It's like, how did it get here?
Really?
Doesn't matter because it's there. But yeah, absolutely. And we're, again, middle of nowhere. North central Pennsylvania. You've worked other properties in central Pennsylvania that are just crazy infested.
It's almost like, when you go to the beach with a family and you head home, there's sand still everywhere. And then months later, you're still at your house, states and states away, and you still find that sand. It's like the seed source. Like, it has to trickle out. And
brush hogging, equipment, skidders, dozers, it travels on that stuff. Boots, there's a lot of these stuff, will stick to animals' hide and fur.
It's
stick
you
to
guys.
Boots. It's us. Well, we hunted.
Y'all said they worked in 27 states since 2017.
We washed the boots
Did
before
you?
we get back to the truck.
I should have power washed your boots before we went on my property.
We always make sure we wash for the CWD. It's like we always make that joke. You go out west to hunt elk. It's like, well, let's make sure we wash our boots off. I don't want to bring any of that stuff back.
Yeah, that's probably not a joke.
But the amount of traffic that moves around this place and country, that's how it gets moved. The seeds on most of this stuff is so small. It's just inconsequential. You don't even think about
the seed bank. I don't know a lot about the seed bank, but it is absolutely fascinating that you could take a chunk of soil from out in my yard that has been, in my front yard would have been a blueberry and kind of like truck farm back from the 40s through the 60s and maybe even 70s. Yeah. And so, it was in agriculture for around here anyway. You could take a block of that soil and go plant it and probably find an incredible amount of native stuff inside of it that's been dormant in that ground for so long. Yep. What strikes me about all this, even talking about invasive species and stuff, is the resiliency and the energy and the life inside of nature. I mean, it's like incredible. I mean,
isn't that amazing?
Thank God that it's like that, though. Could you imagine,
they were as weak as we were, we are?
Or you go across and you
give
see
up.
so many areas that are like, oh, man, that's such, let's say, generally poor quality habitat. Like, that's just bad. Man, but with some of the right practices and disturbances, the things that come back in such a short time frame, it is powerful stuff. And it's incredible to see. Like, there's so much life if we just let it breathe. If we just remove the bad, add sunlight, get a little bit of rain, wham. Most times, it's incredible.
With no fertilizer, you don't have to plant the seed. It's just like the way God designed it to just grow, just to live, just work.
Works.
Like we did on a property that we manage right next to my family farm. It was, it's a mainly southwest facing slope, and crummy timber, wasn't great, real rocky, barely any plants growing in the understory,
leaves and sticks,
not great quality, and so we manage a lot of our landowners manage for deer. That's the focus, or quail or turkeys. But if they've hired us, they've already probably gone to the holistic mindset where they're like, I don't want to do anything that's detrimental to pollinators or to my forest, to the water quality.
I want to make this land as healthy as it can be.
Yeah,
generally,
knowing that that's going to bring in more deer or bigger deer.
Yeah,
and so we're like, okay, this is not good for pollinators, not good for the birds. Really, it's pretty much just setting idle. And somebody's paying taxes on it.
Yeah.
And so what we did was we went in and we did a logging operation. They cut some timber as much as they could find. And really the goal was to completely give it a facelift.
Yeah.
And just change it. Because where it's at was bad, let's make it good. And
two, real quick, the direction, if you hadn't done anything, it wasn't really getting better by itself.
No.
Yeah. It was just slow growing. Yeah.
Trees they were all too densely growing, so they were not healthy. So that made them more susceptible to disease or storm or whatever the case may be, to where we were going to have to just wait on nature to either kill it with the disease, blow it over with a storm, some kind of disturbance, or a fire. And so we decided to speed that process up and do what God called us to do, be a gamekeeper, be a land manager, be a caretaker. And so what we did was we cut trees, we opened up that canopy, and then we went back in with chainsaws.
Cut some more trees.
And cut some more trees. Because what's most timber operations? They come in, it's almost like because most people picture a garden. You go in, you harvest your crops, your corn, your soybeans, or I guess you're not growing soybeans in your garden, vegetables. And then you just leave it idle and the weeds grow up. Well, then they make seed, and then that's what's growing back. And so you start this generation of weeds.
Yeah.
And so what we did was we cut it. Now we cut a lot of crop. Now we have to cut the weeds too and release the next generation of crop. And so when we thinned it and then we started burning it, we had big blue stem growing up that had a 12-inch crown at the at the base of the ground, where it had been sitting there just trying to survive.
Like one or two sprigs we may have seen on that site when it was roughly close canopy timber. Now we're talking it's full crowns,
6-7 foot tall.
Do you think I have big blue
source.
stem on this property? It would have been in the native range.
Oh yeah.
I hear big blue stem used like almost like the crown jewel of southeastern land management.
Gotcha. So I think that there's a big misunderstanding.
Like holy words.
Yeah.
Big blue stem. Oh.
Well, and most people, we're going to generalize here, love to manage for deer. And so they're like, all I want is, this CRP grass. I want switchgrass, Indian grass, big blue stem.
I want tall grass that doesn't
yeah,
blow over.
Here's the thing. Deer don't eat grass. So all you have is cover. So don't get me wrong. It's a native type of cover, but they're not eating it. So what are they going to eat? I don't want a whole property. I don't want a property dominated in just a grass.
Why don't deer eat grass? I mean, I know they
can't break it down in their gut.
But they eat
and they
forbs.
eat some grass.
Broadleaf.
Like
Yep.
they may eat, wheat is a grass.
I think that's about 5% of their diet is comprised of grass.
Some type of grass.
Yeah.
So
but it's not.
very,
because
very small.
they're a woodland animal, so they
Absolutely.
would have.
Well,
developed
and guess where
inside of-
browse.
what grows in woodlands? Typically broadleaves.
Yeah.
Because it's a mixture of sunlight,
sedges.
canopy, and so the leaf itself is wider to capture more sunlight. Where grasses, you find them in pretty much open areas where they're long and slender, where they get 360 sun. Well, they're going to forage on something that is there, a woodland species.
So
Forbs.
if a lot of our, a lot of people, the eastern deciduous forest takes up probably the majority, or well, let me say closed canopy forest would probably be the majority of the North American continent.
Now?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So what would you, in general, like if a guy had a property, just average property, cut some timber, let some sunlight get down to the forest floor, what else would you tell him?
I would say manage with the natural disturbance. Man, you asked a question right there that would excite me. Not to say I want this position.
And I said big blue stem like 5 minutes ago. Yeah, he's about to come out of his chair. Look at it.
We're talking invasive species, and we're
leaning
talking.
in.
And you guys gave me
Now
plenty
natives.
of room to wave my
Yeah,
arms.
man,
and
you
get
got. If
animated.
we ever
Open the
have Adam
canopy.
Keith on your podcast, you better give him lots of
The
space.
sunlight is shining in right now.
So
About to-
when we look at our landscape now, or our country, and it is closed canopy forest, if for the most part you see that, there's some major red flags of that, but there's some major possibilities I see of the opportunity to restore a healthy forest by doing some cutting. First thing I would probably do is consult with a local forester and tell them the overall goal is a healthy forest for not just the trees itself, but the wildlife. I think that gets blurred a little bit of going, I want a healthy forest. Well, it looks a little bit more closed canopy than the wildlife may want. So I would like to see some active management to where we are cutting a little bit of timber. We are using that money to hopefully manage it, give some hire some employees to use prescribed fire if that's what that site needs. If it's not supposed to be a forest, sometimes we get into glades where it's like, this is growing up in trees that we don't even need. Now, most likely those trees aren't ones that are going to make any kind of timber income, but we need to cut those, burn it. Let's bring in some grazing animals. Let's get some disturbance here.
What you typically don't see any more happening Mississippi and east is the middle ground. You typically have pastures or croplands, so open fields, either again in crops or cool season non-native pastures, or you have 100% closed canopy timber. There's nothing on
that
a
mid-range.
spectrum
Yeah.
in between that.
On you guys' podcast one time, I heard it described really well. It was one of your guests.
Okay.
And he described the,
I was gonna say we can't take credit.
Yeah,
Darn it.
I'm sorry, guys. I could have just lied and said it was y'all, and y'all would have been like, "Yeah, I said that." Yeah. No, you probably have said it. But his analogy was like rating vegetation on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah.
And a 1 would be like a fresh cut Bermuda lawn on a golf course, and a 10 would be.
Yeah, I know we didn't say that because I would have gave
closed-
that a negative.
Yeah.
Yeah. a 10 would be a closed canopy, like full scale forest.
Yeah.
And he said we have a lot of 1s and 10s and not a lot of 5s.
Yeah.
Like, so the gradient would be, like, how much of your property is grassland with mid-level shrubs, like successionary
Early
areas.
successional habitat
Yeah.
is in such a decline. It's like, imagine, I can't even imagine a landscape where, let's just say, you asked about a percentage. Let's just say 10% of the country's invasive species. I don't know if that's true or not. But just imagine if that same 10% was early successional habitat and how much better it would be.
Not just for deer, quail, but also pollinators, which is a big
Yeah.
buzzword right now.
Not just
If you
game
just
species.
break down the landscape right now, and you look at, let's just say Missouri and east, because out west, Oklahoma even has some pretty good native landscape still. Probably because we haven't moved, enough of us haven't moved out there to completely destroy it yet. But you go Missouri and east, and we have a majority of the open landscape is either, we've got, of course, residential areas, towns, cities. Then you go into crops or pastures, which for the most part, most cattle operations are non-native dominated grasses. So those two are both non-natives. And aren't great for wildlife. Then you go into the forests, and you have closed canopy, unmanaged forests. And then you go down the south, and you go into pine plantations where it's kind of monoculture.
Yep.
And
All the
then
same thing.
now we go, well, how come there are wildlife anymore? That's a depressing way to look at it, because nothing that they adapted with over years and years and years is that way anymore.
I would say this probably pretty confidently that in many places, or let's say regions of the country or your state, a lot of wildlife populations are surviving. They're not thriving. I think that we see some properties that are doing a lot of good things, or a neighborhood or a co-op is where the wildlife can thrive. And that's where we see some of the best either populations or individuals, whether it's a great, a giant deer. But in many of the places, we're simply just seeing wildlife survive. They're just
see, and that's a little bit surprising, I guess, because in some ways, because like around here, now we don't have a really thick population. Well, here we're running into a lot of problems already. Like maybe a thick deer population isn't what we want, but generally that's what people would think.
Yeah,
like most deer hunters would be like a indicator of how good the habitat is and how good deer are doing is how many deer we have.
Absolutely.
But actually, that's wrong.
I would say this, go back to that same analogy of the habitat, of the 1 to the 10 ratio. If you have a 1 or a very low population when it comes to deer, you don't have a lot of individuals to determine how good or healthy an environment is. So you just have less in a population. If you have too many, then you have a stressful environment where none of them can reach potential. But if you're in the middle at that 5 range, you have a healthy balance of I've got enough deer or individuals on the landscape where I can grow, get some to an age, but then there's not too many of them at their carrying capacity where they can all then still reach their full potential.
Yeah.
So it's a happy medium between it all.
For the deer hunters out there, you think about our part of the world is not known for growing giant deer, but it's not known for really, it's not southern Iowa or west Illinois that everybody's talked about. We have a lot more trees. Most of our forest is not managed, so we just don't have as much food availability. The land use is different. And so we just don't have that many 200-inch deer that show up.
Yeah.
But you take a site or a co-op, a decent tract of ground, you really start managing and really increasing the quality of the habitat, you start seeing big deer show up. Mm-hmm. But then what you also start seeing is does with twins, does with triplets, and you see that population start blowing up. And then over a course of time, you'll see those giant deer that you had fade away and start going back down to what you had before, but you just have a lot more deer. Yeah. Social stress, food availability has changed. And so if you really are shooting for giant deer, the biggest deer you can have on your or in your neighborhood, you got to get the habitat at max level where it's just food year round, and you have to keep that deer population below holding capacity. Mm-hmm. That way those deer have the amount of nutrients.
Description of it.
We've seen and been on a bunch of different places. Some that are like, let's just say 0 or 1 when it comes to like quality habitat. We've been on some sites that are 7 and 8. And it's like, man, this stuff is good, man. This neighborhood's rocking. But at the same time, most places have way too many deer, and you're like, you're
they
good.
could be doing a lot better.
Oh, absolutely,
100%.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I guess that's the point that I'm getting at is like we evaluate deer so often just by how many there are. I mean. And so you don't think about like I don't think about this area having like really poor habitat. I mean I do. I guess I'm a little bit I mean, I've been educated a little bit about, how to improve habitat and stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, most people wouldn't, like the landowners that I hunt on, like, they're just like, man, we got lots of deer.
Oh, yeah.
This is,
Right.
like,
You don't know what you don't know. Like,
Yeah.
just people, for instance, we've worked around home. We actually do more work probably away from home than we do at home because nobody's really setting out thinking they can grow a 200-inch deer in the Ozarks. But we deal with our local neighbors, and it's just like, so what do? You work with landowners who, well, shoot, what we're doing here is great. We got plenty of deer. It's like, no, we
You're
don't.
missing-
It could
you're
be so
missing the
much
boat.
better. Like,
And I think that's so many people in any given region have likely underestimated their region itself.
yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
I've been here, I've observed this for 10 years. It's like, this is status quo. Well, if something's status quo, then you don't have, again, disturbances in that environment to change, manipulate, improve. Therefore, the wildlife will benefit from it. So status quo is like bad from where we come from. It's like every region, there's not a place I can like, that we've been to that I'm like, yikes. Man, just whether that's the native vegetation that's there or that can be there is subpar. Most places we go to, it's all there. It just needs that massive facelift, and then it will be that potential where, man, you can grow and kill Boone and Crockett deer.
What's the temperature? I mean, obviously your business is doing well, so there's people that are willing to talk about these things and implement these strategies. What would you say the temperature of the, at least this part of the country is for the type of wildlife management that you guys are talking about? Is it pretty high? I mean, is your
this
phone
region
ringing
you're
off?
saying?
No, well, just
North America.
Yeah, you guys aren't being limited to anywhere.
I think it's
particular.
growing.
Oh, yeah.
I definitely think that we our mindset is growing. People are being more aware of what's happening to our land. I think people are starting to understand that you can't take a forest and say, there, forest, go be a forest, and you're going to be a forest in 100 years that's still healthy. We can't do that. The preservation mindset, in my opinion, is not something that we can do in a lot of places because of invasive species. And so I think there's people who are really keen on native landscaping. There's companies out there that are really starting to promote their planting. I see more echinacea planted in landscapes now than I ever have. And people are starting to become aware of
purple
that.
coneflower.
There you go.
That's it.
Yeah. And
which is endemic to the Ozarks.
there you go.
Started here.
We saw a lot of it growing in on the roadways coming down here.
Yeah.
Saw a lot of the bad stuff coming down through here too.
Don't even say what it was, man.
Don't go there.
Don't even propagate it.
Just
People will go out, whatever you'd say that's bad, people will go out and get it and plant it in their yard.
take a guess,
That
and it
Adam
was
Keith.
there. That's
It's like
pretty
talking
much how
about
it is.
cigarettes in front of the kids. Yeah, just don't even do it.
Yeah. And so, it's definitely growing. There's a lot of people that are like, I want a healthy landscape. I want clean water. I want clean air. I want to feel like I'm being a part of a solid movement that's worthwhile.
I think that's that we're definitely seeing that. We're seeing, people like the regenerative agriculture model and just understanding cattle and grazing and the cattle are a tool essentially. If you have
Mules or mules.
yeah, there you go.
Can y'all implement mules into more of your stuff?
Maybe.
Yeah.
For
Their
how about-
grazing is a
how
little
about-
different than
We'll get them
You
to
think
drag
so?
the logs out that we cut.
like horses graze differently than cattle.
Oh, yeah.
They do.
Well, mules graze different than horses.
Okay, how so?
Well, they're known for being less selective.
Oh, cool. So they
Okay.
could be good at weed control.
So you have to make that bush honeysuckle.
If
off the
they
hill.
could
Just turn them loose up there.
Here's the thing: if you can train a mule to select Cerisa lespedeza, you're hired, and just,
Dude,
you don't even need to do
challenge
Bear Magazine.
accepted.
We got a full-time job for you.
just turn loose this mule, magic mule.
Yeah, because like horses, they eat grass and keep returning. Ultimately, they'll pull it up by the roots if they want. Cattle, if they're trained and used appropriately, they're not as selective. They'll eat almost anything. Even we've seen cows on good operations eat honey locust in a young form. You wouldn't think they would, but they hammer it. And
it's all the way that you use that tool. If you're rotating, managing them.
Right. If you're keeping them on there year round, it's not doing any good. But rotate them
That's
through.
the thing. When we say, like, the government, U.S. Forest Service, I'll use them as an example. They used to have grazing rights on a lot of the Ozark region. The glades would get grazed. But at some point along the way, the 60s, 70s, 80s, the grazing management wasn't doing what was healthy to the land. Overgrazing was occurring.
It wasn't managed. It was just being grazed.
Yeah. And so they pulled out the grazing. So now the landscape's not getting grazed. And it's like most people picture when we say grazing, they think overgrazed. Well, wildlife don't like that. Well, of course not. We would agree with that. But if you use them correctly, they're more beneficial to wildlife than not having the grazing.
Rotationally, leaving residual grass. I mean, the cycles and all the things that we can go into. I mean, it's crazy to think once you realize it and learn it, you're like, man, cattle are really important to this.
Can be good.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And what I see, I kind of try to we manage with a business mindset. Like any business that just constantly loses money goes broke, right? And there's a lot of landscapes that are businesses that are just going to continue to go broke. And when I say cutting trees, a lot of people are like, whoa. I know to change to fight climate change or to make a healthy landscape, I need to be planting trees and making healthy trees. Well, there's there's oftentimes more things that go on than just that one phrase.
We know this world is way more complex. You're not going to be able to change something by planting some trees, just trees. Go back to diversity. Grasses are super, super important too. Water infiltration, carbon sequestration is completely different, but you need all of them at the right mixture to make something happen.
So cutting trees, you can make money. Cattle grazing, you can make money. And all that money is if done correctly, is also improving the habitat, improving the landscape. Now we're really starting to cook with peanut oil. It's like we're really making something great here, because we're opening up that canopy. We now have funds to either put back in the landscape or put somebody in place to manage this. And man, you want to talk about making a big impact, not just for deer, but birds and everything. What I talked earlier about that where we did the hillside, that we cut trees and we did timber stand improvement. We cut the weed trees and then we burned it. Fellas, that like the deer utilize it. Now it's great nesting for turkeys, but what you can really key in on is the amount of birds that are in that. Like you can just go there and hear birds singing, flying,
very vocal.
Just it's amazing. It sounds alive, and that's what we're looking for in a landscape.
A landscape that is either restored or healthy should not be stagnant. You should hear the buzzing. You should hear birds chirping. Like there should be activity from a wide range of whether, again, insect life all the way up to birds, mammals, utilizing that area. If it's not, it's probably a low grade site. Because they're not going to be there if it doesn't offer anything, right?
Yeah. Man, that's incredible stuff. I want to have you guys back on sometime and we could just talk about turkeys. Actually, back in the spring, I was trying to figure out a way to talk about turkeys and nesting habitat because, this part of the world is hurting. And I think Mike Chamberlain, he was on some of the bigger podcasts.
Well, he was on our podcast
first. Why do you think I said some of the bigger, better podcasts?
That was
I wasn't going to be name dropping. No, I did hear him on your podcast first. But he's done a good job.
What are we? 5th grade. I had him first.
Well, I think he's done a good job, and I mean, he's
Yeah.
saying all the same stuff you guys are doing, but
Yeah.
just talking about brood habitat and stuff. But and we don't really. People aren't thinking as much about turkeys right now, but
Right.
I really would like to have you guys back on.
We are
sometime
we are
and
very
talk about-
passionate about turkeys and turkey hunting, and then making more of them.
Yes.
So, man,
One thing,
I love
Y'all sound
turkeys.
hungry. Y'all sound like poultry farmers. Like
That's right.
Peanut oil, frying, turkey.
My brother working in kind of western, south of here, in western Arkansas. Landscape's pretty similar, different mountain range, air quote that. But one thing that he's got to observe over his last 4 or 5 years working down there is the impact of, everybody knows Arkansas turkey population's not doing great, but where they find and like they can go and employ or other employees that he works with are actively hunting in Arkansas. Of course, he's a Missouri guy, so he leaves Arkansas to come out Missouri.
Yeah.
But where they're finding populations increasing and a lot more turkeys to hunt is these places that are very actively managed. There's lots of fire. There's lots of timber sales, or they're cutting timber, so there's lots of the early successional plants growing up in the disturbed sites.
Yeah,
they're not growing them in closed canopy forests that are getting filled with bush honeysuckle.
It's not by happenstance.
Yeah.
Strong correlations to disturbances and improving or maintaining, stabilizing turkey populations.
Yeah. So hey, I want to talk to you guys some about your hunting, just like your personal hunting.
Yeah.
So y'all are got any big plans this fall? Are y'all
big.
traveling or hunting locally mainly?
Locally. My wife and I will have our second child in mid-August.
Oh wow.
So my traveling is going to be pretty limited.
Yeah.
And at the same time, man, 2020 was so crazy for us with consulting that once deer season starts to dwindle, we start consulting in December usually, and January, February, March, April is just crazy. And this year
We travel enough in that first quarter, generally, that's like, I'm done. So, like, going into the fall, we feel guilty leaving home, leaving the wives.
Yeah.
just to go
And frankly, I
deer hunt,
don't want to, because I just want to stop and sit down and kind of go hunt my own spots. And fortunately, where I grew up hunting my family farm, we still have it today. And so I get to hunt the same turf that I hunted when I was 12 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we have a pretty good buck on there. So
what's a pretty good buck for up there?
Well, this is above average for the area. A pretty good buck would be 150, 160 inch deer.
And we have a couple of those that'll probably be in that range. Yeah.
So
we got one that we're waiting on to show up. The last year was probably low 40, high 30s. It was 3.5-year-old that Matt saw late season that should blow up. But we found sheds to a buck that somewhere around 190. I'll leave it at that.
Are you being serious?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty
I missed
incredible.
him last year. Took a shot at him with a bow last light, shot under him, but he's still around, hopefully. And so
That's just if you will, again, the region of southern Missouri is not often characterized as a big buck place, right? Where you can have incredible
you don't see
hunts.
many hunting shows going to the Ozarks to hunt.
Making
deer.
living, right?
No.
So, but in pockets where that habitat is in place, again, another strong correlation to with you when you have that age structure built in, and you've got some really good deer.
Yeah.
And then you'll find, pockets across, I think of something like South Central Missouri where they're doing more logging operations, and there's the return of some of the great species that we want in an understory. They've got them, and they've got them spread across the landscape. Usually there's a couple big deer that come out of there like, what in the world?
And then as the forest grows back and the canopy closes back up, the big deer you don't see them getting killed there as much.
Yeah.
I think in timber country, you can almost, like when you have mixed hardwoods, not timber country, this pine plantation, but if you have mixed hardwoods, you can almost find a correlation between big deer that follow logging operations. Because those 5 years after the logging operation, there's food and cover everywhere.
Do you think they're following the trucks, or do you think they're just...
They're actually hitching on.
I think there's a little corn getting spilled out. Maybe.
What do you guys think about bears in southern Missouri?
I think it's awesome.
Cool.
It's cool. Yeah. We've
Absolutely,
started
it's cool.
finding them more and more. They're showing up on cameras.
Y'all seen them on
relatively
your
regular.
place.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And we're not too many years away from a bear season. So
Yeah.
We're
I don't know
really
what that's going to be like for us. They're talking like it'll be
mid-October rifle.
Mid-October rifle, and it's kind of like, well, I want to be bow hunting deer at that point. But
we had on Laura Conley the
I listened to
fur
that
bear biologist.
great podcast.
Yeah. So
one of the top out there.
What's that?
Your podcast. I listened to that one.
Oh, of course. Yes. One of the bigger ones.
Yes, exactly.
No, I think it's pretty interesting. If you guys could bait deer in southern Missouri or in Missouri at all, the bear would be a big problem.
Totally.
That conflict back and forth.
Yeah, because if you could bait deer, there would be bears at every corn pile, tearing up every corn feeder, and people would be throwing a fit. So it's interesting for me to look at it because it's a different setting. And we've had bears for so long here, people are just kind of used to it.
It's normalized now.
These bears are moving back in, and they've been there for 25, 30 years or longer even. I think she said there was evidence of bears being in there. I mean, pretty shortly after the reintroduction from Arkansas in the 50s and 60s. So, I mean, there's been bears there. But just in the last 10 years, they've really
gone
popped.
crazy. I worked for the Missouri Department of Conservation in college and shortly after, right out of college. And when we first started trapping bears and first started radio calling bears. And, what's funny about it is that fortunately for Matt and I, we're not government employees. So we're a little bit more aggressive with our management techniques. We don't have to jump through legislation to try to get a timber sale or whatever. We can kind of just go recommend it and people do it. And so we can say things that maybe they wouldn't say. But what's funny when I was working there is we would track these radio collared bears. And when we first started doing it, it was late. It was late in the summer. And even during deer season, when there was no legal, you couldn't legally bait, you would notice trends of bears going to sites on a regular basis, where it's just like, I know there's some sort of attractant there because that bear is there almost every single day.
So you think it's people feeding deer or something?
Feeding deer,
sure.
yeah. People feeding deer and bears were going in. And so they couldn't complain that their feeders were getting tore up because
they were illegally
then they exposed
feeding.
themselves, right?
Yeah. So.
What did I see? Where was I at the other day? I was somewhere the other day. Well, it was here. We now have CWD regulations that you can't bait deer 30 days before season.
Okay.
Wow, that's Missouri anyway. So even without CWD, that's Missouri. You could bait during the off season, but 30 days before
you had to stop.
Season, you had to stop.
Oh,
now you guys are jumping into Missouri.
Well, no, we're the opposite. We can't feed any time except 30 days before hunting season.
Oh,
and it's exact opposite.
Does CWD stop being transmitted 30 days before? And then...
No, the deer hunting's more important.
Well, it was totally a political
right.
move. But Walmart and different places around are selling corn. I don't want to say right now because I hadn't been to Walmart in a long time. But people are selling corn, and it's like all a game warden would have to do is go down to Walmart, watch who buys 200 pounds of corn, and then
follow them out to the woods.
But what's the point of writing a ticket for a judge or somebody just to throw it out?
Yeah, maybe so.
Because it depends on the region. In Missouri, corn is sold in Walmart and sporting goods stores almost, I'm assuming, year-round.
So you can bait all other times of the year except hunting season?
Yes.
In Missouri, yes.
Unless you're in a CWD zone.
Yeah, 10 days before hunting season.
I just think it's 15 maybe. It's somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But ironically, and it's just like... what a world we live in. But when hunting season opens up, it's like they go get the pallet jack and they move it up closer.
Right at the register.
And you're just like, are you serious right now? We can't.
Wow.
Even in CWD zones where you're not supposed to bait at all, it's like they still sell corn.
So it's sort of not. I guess
money
it would just
talks.
be so hard to enforce.
It's bird seed, Adam.
Yeah.
It's not
bird seed.
Bird seed.
Yeah. It's actually planted for gardens.
What's that?
We see the same thing. It's all over.
Yeah.
We got an uphill battle in a world of changing perspectives. That's what really it comes down to in everything that we deal with is changing perspective.
And usually the most beneficial thing is long-term.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, that's the way it is.
You can't cut corners with this kind of stuff. I don't think you can cut corners in conservation, really.
Yeah, that's a
It's
good
a
that's
natural-
a good statement.
it's
You
a
can't
natural-
cut corners in conservation.
world that we're working with, and that you have to look at the foundation, which in what it operates on, and it doesn't really cut corners.
Right.
The system is the system. I think we need to learn first what the system is, embrace it, and then manage in that system.
Yeah.
We're not now, as we're seeing all this stuff occurring that we talked about in the podcast.
Yeah.
Learn the
It's
system. and we're
management
gonna be
with, when you learn that system that he's talking about, it's not that we sit on a throne and reign over all of it. We just fit right in the middle of all of it, and we just have to figure out how
good.
to
And it's
kind of
nothing that like
manage with it.
we created or Land Legacy did. It's just like, this is the way that God designed it. I'm just embracing that. I'm learning it. And now I'm applying, truth in the way that nature works
Yeah.
to nature.
Yeah.
Well, it's like another statement we make sometimes talking about invasive species and improving deer and whatnot. It's like, I'm not going to manage a native species, talking about deer, with non-native plants.
Yeah.
I'm going to find the native plants that they like, manage for those. I'm probably going to improve that native animal species at the same time.
Yeah. And that's a longer game plan than going out and buying corn and pouring it out up here.
Totally.
is.
Or
But
going
let me tell
taking
you,
a chainsaw
you
and
will
doing a hinge
create
cut.
you will create a deer mecca for a couple of days by putting out 200 pounds of corn up there.
Oh, yeah.
That's what's so it's so bizarre, and at the same time you're confined by the culture in some ways. But like like baiting deer in Arkansas, it's such a political thing. I mean, like the culture has become revolves, on private land. You can't bait on public land.
Yeah.
So there's still guys that are on public land that are deer hunting based upon sign and trails and stuff. But then, like, if you own private land and you're deer hunting in Arkansas, I mean, like, it's almost like don't hate the player, hate the game. I mean, you gotta bait deer.
Yeah.
I mean, and I say quote unquote gotta.
You gotta.
And I'm torn on it because I mean,
Sure.
hunting small properties. I mean, I have no shame
If you don't do it, your neighbor
in
is.
saying.
Oh, yeah.
And it's actually a lot harder to kill a big deer over supplemental feed than you think.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like
It is.
there are guys that
heard
are
that from-
masters at it, and you know what? They're Jedi masters because it's hard. And so like to kill big deer over feed.
Here's an idea. Let me just off the top of my head say what we do. There's a lot of guys that hunt public ground, and then you search for like these perfect bedding areas, like where it's like, oh, he's bedded here. Private land guys, we can go, well, okay, what makes that so special? Okay, I'm going to take that and I'm going to go do it on 20 spots on my farm to where I've got ideal bedding everywhere.
I'm going to replicate that success.
What about, when it comes to the baiting? Everybody says, most guys that hunt over bait say, well, it's really hard to shoot a mature deer over a bait site. We have to really hunt them going to the bait site because they show up right after dark. Well, let's not. So let's take and create ideal bedding, secure bedding somewhere using terrain features and what we know about natural disturbance to create what he would call a bedroom. And then let's find a place in between the two to hunt him as he's getting up. It's like, that sounds pretty fun to me. Now I don't have to sit and stare at squirrels eating all the corn.
Yeah.
And raccoons.
And
raccoons.
you would kill better deer too.
You'd kill
Hey,
better.
anytime I dog on baiting deer, I've got to clarify myself, or I've got to say, 'cause I've had people say, well, Clay, you're a massive proponent of baiting bear. Baiting deer and baiting bear is totally different things.
Yeah.
We bait bear to selectively harvest bear. We're not trying to supplement a bear's diet to improve his health.
Yeah.
Well,
You see
I
what
think
I'm saying?
That's
Yeah,
an
yeah.
important distinction.
We're when we're baiting a bear, we are trying to draw a bear in because they're such a dispersed.
Yeah.
They don't have high densities. Like a deer would have these really high densities. A bear would have very low densities, and so it's like totally different. Because what is for you? You know who you are out there in podcast world. Who's going to email me and say, Clay, I thought you were a proponent of baiting. I absolutely am for bear, and I'm not saying I'm against it for deer. Totally, it's kind of a catch-22 in places where you have been able to do it for so long. They probably just need to. They need to just cut it out.
To me, I think it
And
needs to
then just
be
let-
Rip off the
statewide or
Band-Aid.
nationwide.
They do. I would be totally cool if they cut out baiting for deer.
Yeah.
I mean, and they really should Doesn't even make sense.
This is what we talk about and what we started seeing. Let's take a
crutch.
person who has a bait site out and you're monitoring it with trail cameras. And I want your listeners, because I know there's probably a lot of them in this region that bait, because that's the way of life. Like, all right. So, do you get more pictures of raccoons in the course of your baiting? Do you get more pictures of raccoons or deer? And based on my experience, when I used to put out corn, it was almost always more raccoons. And if you're a deer hunter, and especially a turkey hunter, you've now got this like embedded in your brain that raccoons are bad, that you must trap, kill them, don't stop killing them until you don't see them anymore, kind of mindset.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, is my corn more beneficial to the deer, more beneficial to my hunting, or more beneficial to the predator that I hate?
Like, you're not only supplementing food for deer, you're supplementing for this species as well. They're benefiting as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey,
it makes
whatever,
you kind of go,
but realize
oh, man.
that.
And that's why, like, when we step back to trying to replicate nature, it's like, well, I'm just gonna use fire and grazing and this kind of disturbance, because that right there is a little bit hard to chew.
Yeah, I think to me the overarching principle that stands out in my mind is that it's much harder to do what you guys are describing, but the long-term benefits are much higher.
Oh, totally.
It's much easier to, either not manage and just hunt the deer that you have.
Yeah.
Which, some people, it's just not a priority to manage deer. So, whatever. Yeah. There's just some people that just have some land. They're like, we go out there for 3 days a year and hunt, and no big deal. But it's anyway, just in life, that's always the case. What's hard and long-term is usually way better.
Yeah.
Yes.
But takes a lot more energy and effort, And so,
Yeah. And those people who are sitting there wondering, how do I fit into all that? There's a lot of wins along the way too. If you're not just
you take incremental, you could do small things.
Like you say, okay, I'm going to take that long route. I'm going to manage it in this way, this mindset. And let's say you're doing it for deer. Well, sometimes that goal, it may take years to get there, and then you stabilize it and you maintain it, whatever. But although your goal is for whitetail deer and you want to kill 160, whatever, there's other things that you can enjoy along the way. Rabbit populations are going to increase. Other small game.
Yeah.
The birds that we hear in the woodland that you just talked about, that's cool. Like, you did that. Like that is an ecological significance of what you did. It's not a 160-inch deer, but maybe you heard one summer tanager. Now there's what? How many? You can go there and hear
half a dozen on that same site.
Yeah.
There's these little wins along the way in this long game that you need to be focused on.
Yeah, you got to have a certain mentality.
Yeah.
Well, when you think about it, like, as a human being, we're pretty prideful. Like, we want to think that at the end of our life, there'll be a ton of people at our funeral, and 200 years after our death, that people are still going to remember us and talk about us. Like, that's just our human nature. But if you look at the most common type of hunting habitat enhancement, and I say that kind of loosely because it's not really habitat enhancement, but if we go out and we put out a feeder, we put up a food plot, we hang a tree stand, or we make some trails, and you did that for 5 years, and then you didn't do it for 5 years, and you came back, what would there be that you'd have a rusted up feeder and a rusted up tree stand and a trail that's overgrown? You probably wouldn't even be able to tell that your work was ever there. But if you do, overall habitat enhancement, you plant a diverse prairie, or you restore a woodland or a savanna, or you put in a young forest clear cut, that's something you go back 20 years later and they're probably going to see it. Yeah. And it's like, it's
like lasting impact.
Impact. It's a legacy of managing that land in an appropriate manner to where your kids and your grandkids hopefully can see that and carry that torch, rather than, there's Dad's rusted up feeder and tree stand that now I have to haul away.
I got to haul out of here. And in that, like, there's even in that same scenario, there's so many either life lessons about whether it is life and death or the progression of new growth and spring green ups, all these different lessons that you can share with other people You can't really do that when you go in, walk into a feeder and put a 50-pound bag of corn. You could see that deer respond to it, but you still have that same advantage by going the conservation mindset and improving the actual habitat and the landscape itself. I think we often underestimate our potential to have that impact because there's simple ways to do it. But we can impact the landscape. We can impact regions. We can impact states. It just is a long-term goal.
That's cool. That's very cool. I got to tell the story and then we'll end because it's pretty connected. Going back to supplemental feeding and everything you just guys said, I think sums up kind of who you guys are and kind of like your like deeper philosophies for why you're doing what you're doing.
Sure.
Which I like it. Okay, so back to the like the lesser topic of baiting. Bears in the southern Ouachitas are expanding pretty rapidly into the Gulf coastal plain of Arkansas.
Yeah.
So like the larger regions of Arkansas would be the Ozarks, like western Arkansas, Ozarks, Ouachitas, and the Gulf coastal plain, which would basically be like getting in down to like the swamp country.
Yep.
Like pretty much like alligator country and stuff. Black bears are rapidly moving south. And that's a part of Arkansas that's fairly sparsely populated, like no major population centers. Mainly would be forestry, like big pine plantations and stuff. Myron Means, the bear biologist for the state of Arkansas, believes that the backbone of the expansion of bears into that area, which is primarily pine, like a pine-dominated landscape, which pine tree does nothing for a bear.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is supplemental corn piles.
Wow.
He thinks that basically, so a bear's biology, like, or his caloric calendar revolves around fall hard mast.
Sure.
And like gathering these massive calories in the fall.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Before denning.
Yeah.
And there are white oaks down there and stuff, so they're feeding on that some, but pine
But
dominated.
not to the prevalence when everything or majority is a pine plantation. Right?
Oh yeah, it's like massive pine plantations and a lot of monoculture.
So
and he thinks basically corn, people feeding deer has become the part of their yearly architecture.
I would
why
say
they're thriving.
So.
I mean, there's no point to that. I mean,
honestly,
I'm not like saying that's good.
That's
I'm just
an
saying that's
interesting thing.
interesting.
It is. I'm processing.
I'm
that.
sitting here going, okay,
Yeah.
what's the? Because I'll share a similar story. I don't really get, the idea of Missouri repopulating or growing the bear population to a point where we can hunt them and make the state can make money on license sales. That's pretty stinking cool. We're restoring a native species to a native region, and now we get to enjoy that.
That's a big win for conservation.
Absolutely. It's awesome. And there are deer hunters that are going to complain, but you know what? It's they were here before we were. And so it's super cool. But the idea that population is growing because of a supplement doesn't have the longevity or the sustainability that
it doesn't
has
have
me
the
a little
lure for me.
concerned.
It was like a weird stomach. Like I felt it was like, oh, that's almost like
and the
distasteful.
reason I say that because I have a similar feeling with our elk restoration that we're doing in Missouri, because a lot of the food plots, the areas that they're trying to provide this food, they're planting orchard grass, which is a non-native cool season grass, and it's like, so we're taking this big push to restore native species
and feeding them something non-native.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Let's try to fix the landscape and restore the woodland savannas, the glades, and give them the native species that they have adapted to.
Because this is the funny thing, like those sites which were restocked in, obviously like they chose those sites because of the potential of the landscape to offer to be restored, yet we're supplementing it all with this non-native green source.
To me, it's
that's actually the same story.
Let's go take a native prairie and say we're restoring the native landscapes, but throw cows out on it. Like it's large ruminants on a native grassland. Like what's We just switched it from plants to animals.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's cool that they're expanding, and it's cool that there's a potential that more people are going to get to see them.
Myron's the first one to say that's not research back.
Yeah,
that's just that's just his observation. That's just what he thinks is happening, and I think it's totally probable.
Sure,
I think
sure.
What I've thought is that, well, heck, if they outlawed baiting or something, would that mean that they would leave those areas?
Yeah,
and it's Matt's dying to say something.
No, go ahead.
I think the bears will find a way to survive down there. Because I think they're using that because it's a great food source.
It's
and
easy.
It's probably propping them up a little bit. But I think if it was gone, I think, man, they're such a successful omnivore.
Here's a question, Do you think, one, growing seasons are different too? So like that length and severity of winter, I think is going to help. So it's almost like that crutch to get them into the area. But then if, let's just say it did happen, baiting was removed, do you think that you would certainly see that bear population, if there was those more populated areas, those bears then be supplementing on trash? The more of the cultural conflict with people, they have to take one supplement from humans and then go to another one to from a caloric standpoint. If nature is not providing it. Now,
it's definitely possible.
Yeah, they have a wide range of stuff that they eat, right? I mean, it's crazy. But we all know that bears love easy meals. Wildlife in general love easy meals.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. That if you took it away, then all of a sudden you'd have nuisance problems and stuff.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Here's a question for you before we wrap up.
Yes.
So I mentioned earlier, Missouri will open up a season hopefully in the near future for bears. There'll be, from my understanding, and I didn't listen to that podcast, so my apologies. Do you feel, from what I've heard, there is not going to be any baiting allowed.
Right.
And there's no baiting, private or public.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a short window with a rifle, right?
Okay. Yeah.
From what I understand. How successful? What I picture is probably by design. What I picture is a bunch of us Missourians who have drawn tags, headed to the woods. No dogs either, I don't think.
No.
Headed to the woods, walking around in densities or in areas where there is a higher density of bears, pushing them out. So what I picture is it's going to be very tough to fill tags.
Yeah.
And I picture the bear hotspots or the bear population dispersing into larger regions to where then those bears can repopulate to where 10 years from now we'll have bears everywhere.
Yeah.
Maybe that's by design. But I just, when I heard the potential regulations, I was like, ooh, that'll be a tough tag to fill.
I think you're on the right track and say that that's going to be a super hard animal to hunt.
Yeah, at that time frame.
We have a phrase that we use on the podcast, a type of hunting that we describe as the sheep hunt of the South.
Okay.
Like we actually have shirts that say sheep hunt of the South. And the whole idea is that hunting bears in the eastern deciduous forest is hard, like a western sheep hunt. Like it's a low probability hunt, very low probability. The only thing that Missouri has going for it is these are unhunted bears.
Yeah.
So that's what's incalculable. It's hard for me to calculate based upon because our bears are hunted. And, I mean, it's I think it's as tough a hunt as there is in North America. And I'm talking about all the types of hunting.
Wow.
To go take a bow. And now I'm also talking about take a bow and go in the national forest and kill a bear on purpose.
Oh, I feel like that'd be almost next to impossible.
Well, I mean, that's what we've spent a lot of our time the last couple of years doing and talking about. And people are getting better at it as they're being educated on how to do it. And it's much more stable and predictable than I ever thought.
Yeah.
That bear right there was the first bear that I ever killed in national forest on purpose. And that picture behind it is right where I killed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That looks a lot like the Ozarks, minus your rocks look a little bit more smooth than ours. Ours is a little bit more ragged.
It's so regional, like different places, the rocks vary. But no, that bear was right there. So I'm with you, Adam. It's going to be a low odds hunt. I think some people will kill some, but they had to go with that strategy, though. I mean, they didn't want to start off that. They're starting at making it as absolute hard as possible,
which makes total sense.
That's a great strategy for bears because bears are, low reproductive rates.
Yep.
The females don't start reproducing until they're 3 or 4 years old, and then they only produce cubs every 2 years.
What's it growing 9% or something like that?
Yeah,
population, I think.
and that's not a super. That's pretty average. So it's not like this population is just like growing exponentially.
Right.
I think you'll see a time when it does. There are parts of Arkansas that are growing by 18% per year. Meyer means to me, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And because these big, large carnivore populations just don't naturally need to produce a dauphin can give birth her first year of life.
Cycles are completely
She
different.
can come into heat when she's 6 months old, be bred, and have twins the next spring. I mean, it's possible.
Yeah.
So bears are not like that. So they manage them conservatively. So anyway, I think they're doing a good job. It's going to be super tough.
Yeah.
But could you imagine if they allowed you to bait out the gate, then
We'd
took
shoot
it away?
half of them right then, it seems like.
But then changed the regulation and took it away?
Yeah.
That would cause even worse
Yeah,
of
it
a
would
storm.
be big political problems.
Yeah.
I predict that maybe one day they would have a bait on private land hunt, just because that's what Arkansas and Oklahoma have done pretty successfully.
Right.
Really successfully. But our populations are so big. Like the reason, and here's what a lot of people don't understand. We preach it on the podcast all the time. Where you can bait bear in North America is because there is no other effective way to manage them. I mean, where you can spot and stalk bears usually, and they can harvest the number of bears they need to harvest by spot and stalk, then that's what they let them do. Man, in Arkansas, our population is growing so much. I mean, we currently have a population of 6,000 bears in Arkansas, and we've been knocking the fire out of them for 20 years. I mean, if we had not taken out 300 to 400 bears a year for the last 20 years, I mean, bears would be overrunning this place.
We'd all have one beating down our garbage cans every
We
night.
absolutely would. And so it's such a win-win for sportsmen when you can manage a population, keep it under control relative to the amount of habitat that we have.
Do they have any idea how much money comes in with tags and for
Arkansas? It's hard to track bear hunters because everybody that buys a tag has a bear tag.
Oh.
So I mean, like you buy Arkansas sportsman's license, you get 6 deer, 2 turkeys, a bear, all the small game you
handing
want.
out tags like it's candy down here.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's a good state for. Actually, it's a terrible state for out of state hunters.
Say, slow down.
Yeah. That's funny.
No. Hey, thanks so much, guys.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks
I
for
like
having us
what
on.
you guys are doing, and people can find you guys at Land and Legacy. And now y'all would have like personal Instagram pages too, or no? So Matt Dye.
I think mine's
Adam
Adam B. Keith, something like that. I only post
photos
like once
Land
every
and
6 months
Legacy
of
is
my
the best.
daughter. So
Okay,
That's
Land and
place.
Legacy.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
If you want to see Adam's daughter, you can like his page.
probably not good ones. Yeah.
So yeah, Land and Legacy. And man, I almost started off the podcast by talking about your podcast. You guys, you hadn't made 600 episodes of your podcast, have you?
No, we're right around 245.
Why are you numbering your episodes as like 600 something?
I think that's Dan.
That's Dan. That's a Dan Johnson. I don't know.
Okay,
I don't know.
I didn't
we've been
realize
doing
that was happening.
Y'all have made like 200 something.
well, we've been doing it for like
240. Yeah,
3.5 years or so, and averaging
every week,
twice a week.
2 a week.
Yeah.
I appreciate the persistence there.
Yeah.
No, so I'll end up have said this before because I'll say this in the intro that I do, but like your podcast is full of it's like information driven.
Correct.
Yes.
So like our podcast is like more like conversational, like long for we're not as much like we do some tip driven tactical stuff for sure, but you guys is more of a format of we're giving we have topics and we're giving information,
Yes.
which is great, and they're usually shorter, under an hour most of them,
Yeah.
Anywhere
so,
from 30
minutes to an hour.
Yep, 30 to an
yeah.
hour.
So man, tons of information. And that's part of the reason I didn't necessarily want to go into like a specific topic on this podcast because you guys have covered so much. People can
Right.
go back and look at all your stuff and learn a ton. You really can. You guys are doing a great job, I think, of just disseminating really solid information.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
really are. And so yeah, Keep doing it. Good luck with that big buck this year. Do y'all both hunt in the same place? You let him hunt?
We
looking
were.
at Adam
He's got a
saying,
lease
you
we
let-
now.
were. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I just leased 160 acres, and I don't know. It was second night of putting cameras out. There's a good one there. I was like, hey,
Yeah.
all right,
Nice.
all right.
My brother and I are working on buying that farm right now. So
Out from under Matt?
No,
Matt had the
no,
opportunity,
no.
but
No,
yeah.
it's right next to their family farm.
Dude, he's
too.
sitting right beside you.
No, yeah. So
No.
But no. You're trying to buy the lease that he
No.
currently has.
No. The lease is next to
he's
their
trying
family
to
farm.
divide us.
Yeah.
No.
Him and his brother are purchasing the land that's next to their family farm.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so,
Okay.
yeah, no.
Gotcha.
It's all
Gotcha.
good. It's
Yeah,
all
I
good.
was, interesting story about family farm. Not to go off on another rabbit trail, but it's been owned. My grandpa owned it. Great grandpa owned it in 1892. Sold it to Stark Brothers, a fruit tree company. You ever heard of the fruit trees? But sold it for 1,000 fruit trees. My grandpa bought it back in 1952. So it's been in the family farm ever since. So my brother and I are trying to expand it and buy the neighboring property.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
1,000
That's very
fruit
cool.
trees.
1,000 fruit
Yeah,
trees.
this part of the
makes me
world.
shake my
I'm
head.
trying to buy it for a lot of fruit trees.
This part of the world used to fuel North America with apples. Y'all know that.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
the Ozarks were like in the
Huge orchards
In
around
the-
here.
first 20 years of the 20th century, early 1900s.
Yeah.
Apple trees, yeah.
Do you have many short-leaf pines around here?
Mm-mm.
Where you're at?
Not like right
Not
here.
right this.
You get 25 miles away.
They get cut out, or they just aren't here.
Man, you drive from here to Fort Smith in the winter and see a lot of, it's not all public land, but it's pretty just native Ozarks.
Yeah.
You won't see a pine tree.
Did he say native Ozarks?
He
Closed
said that.
canopy?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Wound.
This white man manipulated.
He has not listened to the podcast.
Well, all right, thanks, guys.
Appreciate it, man.
Keep the wild places wild, because that's where the bears live.
Yeah.
And we got to get the Japanese honeysuckle out.
After 3 years of work, our follow-up to the Meat Eater Fish and Game Cookbook is here. It's the Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, campfire, and camp stove. Here is your book for everything that's best cooked or eaten outside. From grilling to open fire cooking to Dutch ovens to smokers to barbecue to backpacking meals to how to pull off the perfect fish fry, with pit stops along the way for lessons about Ice Age cooking methods and the best 5 ways to construct a cooking fire you can be proud of. And of course, we're focusing on wild game and fish here with over 100 recipes, including stuffed venison burgers 3 ways, wild duck with ahi verde sauce, a jerky made with cola, a gin and tonic made with fire-charred lemons, and grilled frog legs made with a sticky sweet sauce. This ain't your normal cookbook, so be prepared to be surprised. Get your copy now. For more info, visit themeateater.com or buy it wherever books are sold.